In the last video, we discussed the basic concept of the archetypes and the four main archetypes of the mature masculine. And in this video, we'll go over the general structure of the archetypes and the developmental progression from boyhood to full manhood. And this will help you to determine where you are on your own developmental journey. Now, you'll want to pay attention to see where you might have imbalances that you can address. And if you're not a man but have a close relationship with a man, it will help you to approach that relationship in more resourceful and creative ways. Now, these archetypes are based on the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Jungian psychologist Robert Moore and mythologist Douglas Gillette. Moore and Gillette argue that the goal of any man's development is to move from the psychology of the boy into one of full masculine expression. And the problem in our modern world is the loss of ritual initiation into manhood. The reason that lack of ritual is such a problem is because without it, there's not a reference point where a man understands, I'm no longer a boy, I'm now a man, with a full awareness of the benefits, the costs, and the responsibilities that manhood brings. And instead, in modern culture, we have what Moore calls pseudo-initiations. These are what might be found in the military, a fraternity rush, a sports team, or even a gang. And these microcultures understand the need for initiation to prove oneself, but the problem is that they often glorify things like domination, sadism, masochism, and can entail acts of violence, some of it pretty extreme. Instead of mature masculinity, which is protective, but also nurturing and generative, these pseudo-initiations promote a manhood that is based on control, abuse, and domination. The vast majority of men, though, have absolutely no initiation one way or the other, and as a result, men aren't living with awareness, inspired action, compassion for others, and are not fully integrated and consciously expressed. The archetypal structure can be symbolized by a pyramid, with each side or triangle of the pyramid representing one of the four archetypes. And in the center of the pyramid is a complete but smaller pyramid that represents the archetypes in their immature or boyhood form. And on any triangle, the top represents the full expression of the archetype, and at the bottom of the triangle are the shadow aspects. And these are the characteristics of fear, aggression, weakness, selfishness, insecurities. And additionally, each corner is divided into right and left, passive and active, or yin and yang. What these structures essentially offer is a map to see where you are in your masculine development. You may be at the apex or fully expressed in one archetype, but be underdeveloped or stuck in the shadow versions of the other archetypes. Or you may not have fully integrated the full boyhood part of the archetype. So if we take warrior, for example, we can see the apex of the triangle representing the fully expressed warrior who takes responsibility, establishes conscious boundaries, is in service to others, and protects what is valuable not just to him, but his community. And on the lower left, which is the active aspect of the shadow, is the man as a sadist, and he's either consciously or unconsciously creating destruction and looking to dominate others in the world. And this plays out as the steamrolling boss or the company that professes pro-environmental values but works behind the scenes to subvert those same values. And on the lower right, we see the masochist. This is the man who takes his internalized violence and aggression and turns it towards himself. Now, the deeper internal pyramid shows the psychological development of the boy. The immature boy aspect of the warrior can be a grandstander bully on the active side or the coward on the passive side. And the boy must go through and then transcend his individual hero's journey in order to become a fully expressed warrior. If he doesn't graduate from his hero's journey, he's bound to get stuck in the pendulum of the active and passive shadow. And many men are unable to transform their hero's journey into wisdom and thus get stuck continuing to fight in an attempt to prove themselves over and over again. This is a man who makes a great achievement in life, but it's never enough. He's constantly looking for the next thing to conquer and never gets to the full expression of the mature warrior. He's liable to be off trying to conquer something externally while his family is at home needing his generative, nurturing, integrative guidance. This is a man who might be crushing it at work, but isn't around for his daughter's basketball game. And at the same time, on the other side, he may lose touch with his inner hero. This is a man who's defeated from life and just can't seem to drag himself off the floor. And so it's the same with each of the other archetypes, the king, the magician, and the lover. Each has their respective representations of the man in his fullness, as well as the man in his shadow, and in each we have the active and passive expression. And within each, again, is the childlike aspect of those archetypes and the developmental process that the man must integrate into his psyche. Without integrating the childlike aspects of the archetype, he loses access to key parts of his power and fullness. Now, the boy aspect of the magician is the precocious child. This is the child who's super curious about the world, wants to learn everything about it. And ideally, the precocious child becomes the mature magician. But if he's unable to remember or integrate this part of himself, he becomes cynical, forgets about the beauty and wonder of the world and what life has to offer. Now, the boy aspect of the lover is the Oedipal child. And I don't love the word Oedipal because in this context, it's not referring to the Oedipus complex. It refers to the boy's and later the man's desire for the great feminine goddess and the receptive, loving energy that femininity provides. And it's also his desire for a connection with others, but even more importantly, connection to himself. When fully integrated, this Oedipal child aspect deepens into the heart energy of a man's spirituality, and when it's not, he'll stay stuck in either the addicted or the impotent lover. And finally, we get to the king. The boy aspect of the king is the divine child, who's inspired and inspiring. He has a genuine zest for life, a sense of well-being, and is enthusiastic for whatever new adventure appears before him. When properly integrated into the mature masculine, the divine child becomes the ageless part of the man. It's the man who never forgets about the fun that life has to offer, of his own possibilities for greatness, for creativity and renewal and adventure. But when not integrated, a man may give up, settle for mediocrity, and not realize that he always has the potential to grow in new ways. Individually, a man may be focused on trying to overcome or eliminate the shadow aspects of himself. If he does that, he won't be successful. And instead of coming into his full potential, when he tries to eliminate those shadow parts, he suppresses them, pretends they don't exist, but in secret acts them out. An example is a religious leader who may rail against homosexuality in public, but in private, he's a closeted gay man. Externally, society finds ways to shame men with pejorative terms like toxic masculinity or mansplaining, but what that does is it neglects to see the journey of maturation that a man really has to go through. So while those behaviors and words are problematic, they also oversimplify and place behavior into black and white terms while missing the real root cause of men's suffering. So when the mature man understands that he has all of these parts inside him, he knows he is both a masochist and a sadist, a bully and a coward. But how is a man supposed to recognize, understand, and integrate these parts of himself? Does he need to go to therapy for 10 years or a re-education camp run by intersectional feminists? No. According to Moore, what is missing in modern society is the initiation or rite of passage into manhood. And more traditional societies recognized this need. The boy has to go on his hero's journey. And these ancient rites were often quite severe, as the boy had to undergo some sort of physical trial or punishment. There were scarring ceremonies where the boy would be scarred with a symbol that showed that the boy within him was dead and he was now ready to take on the responsibilities of manhood. In fact, there's an amazing scene from an old movie called The Emerald Forest, where a boy living in the Amazon has to go through such a ceremony. It's on YouTube. I highly recommend you check it out. So instead of these pseudo-initiations, which we referred to earlier, Moore argues that we need to return to true initiation. And today there are groups such as the Mankind Project and others that seek to initiate men into the mature masculine. And basically they're trying to replicate these rites of passage without the physical scarring and severe danger to life and limb. Personally, years ago, I went to a Mankind Project retreat and I found it quite transformative. There were men of all races, shapes, sizes, and sexual orientations, and what I saw was a unique expression of each man's masculinity. Rather than trying to conform to a set of preconceived notions about what it means to be a man, each was free to show up as his own version of his masculine self. And it was tremendously empowering, and I believe can be part of the solution for the modern crisis that men are currently facing. Now in the next video, I'll do a deep dive into the warrior archetype, which will be followed by the magician, the lover, and lastly and most importantly, the king. You can also go back and watch the introductory video to get a better understanding of how the archetypes developed and their importance in male psychological development.